Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And you already know what today's show is about. You know who it's brought to you by, our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. Getting ready for the cocktail party on Saturday. It's going to be so much fun. We're loaded today. Terence Edwards in a few minutes to talk about what Georgia needs to do to get it done against the Gators. Brad Nessler, who will call the game Saturday 3:30 on CBS. He's going to be with us as well. We are jam-packed and ready to go. Glad to have you with us. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
If you can stick with us for the full show today, you're going to get a lot. I think you'll be glad you're here. Later on today, it's Brad Nessler who will call the game for CBS Sports on Saturday, who's been around for a lot of these Georgia-Florida games. He knows the history of this rivalry. He knows the history of both these programs. He will be with us on today's show, talk about what's going to happen in Jacksonville on Saturday. Of course, the very normal TV backdrop for all of this on CBS. Fun to have him later on. Terence Edwards also in today's show about what Georgia needs to do. A lot of this will center on the offense, of course. What Georgia needs to do to get it done on Saturday as well. So Terence Edwards, Brad Nessler, both a part of today's program, DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Let me begin this way, though. I think that there is a element of the motivation required in college football that sometimes gets misunderstood. There's a thing that you hear a lot when it comes to big games like this. If you need to be motivated to play in a game like Georgia-Florida, then you don't belong in the SEC. That's some version of that kind of gets said from time to time, downplaying the role that motivation plays in a game like this. And as I said before, I think there is a misunderstanding about some of that kind of stuff. I think that obviously, the players look across the field. They know what's at stake against a team like Florida. They know what's at stake for their own reputations and their own football legacies. Everybody kind of gets that. But energy is a finite resource that when you use it up, it doesn't just naturally replenish itself. There's a process that you have to go through for that kind of thing. And for both these teams on Saturday, for different reasons, but still the same end result, for both these teams on Saturday, the first half of the year has been a grind. Georgia's been on the road now for a number of weeks. Georgia's faced Alabama. That's a game where your energy level naturally kind of rises up to a certain point, and then when you don't win that, there's a little bit of a regression there. Georgia's last Saturday playing against Kentucky, that's a noon game. I kind of joked on Twitter that I'd never been to a noon game that felt noonier than the one that I was at last Saturday in Lexington, and that kind of deals with your motivation level, or to say it a different way, your energy level. For Florida, it's kind of their own version of this. They've dealt with coronavirus, they've lost a game, and there's just a natural need right now to refocus all of this, to reach down deep, to try to find some reservoir of extra energy that you still have left over. After you've been beaten on all season long, and you've gotten up, and you've tried to do your best, and now you've got to try to reach in and find a new gear for a game like Florida. I'm not going to downplay this. I think the need to find some level of motivation for Saturday, some new source of energy when, frankly, your energy may otherwise feel depleted, I do think that's a part of this game on Saturday for both teams, and I'll get into this in a moment. I think it's interesting that both these teams seem to be going about this in a slightly different way. With that in mind, I thought Georgia linebacker Nakobe Dean was very interesting this week. He was asked by a reporter about Monty Rice, one of the guys who's a team leader for Georgia, and I've kind of always jokingly said, when I've had a chance to interview Monty, there's an earnestness to the way that he speaks that I would cause me to believe anything he said. I don't care what Monty Rice was talking about. The way which Monty Rice speaks, kind of like that earned experience of life, earned credibility. He just sounds very believable no matter what he talks about. Well, apparently Rice stepped up and spoke to the Georgia team this week, and Nakobe Dean said, as a way of kind of recentering our motivation for Saturday, it does kind of play a role in what goes down. This is Nakobe Dean talking about Monty Rice.
Man, he talked to the team. He addressed the team about how some guys, we got to step up. We got to play definitely with guys being out and everything, and basically hitting that midpoint of the season, how we got to start elevating our game.
What kind of effect do you think that he had with y'all?
He talked to the team really, not like probably just all the time like he did then, but he often talks to the team, and I mean, of course, he had an effect. Hopefully, hit a lot of the young guys knowing they got to step up, and we're gonna need them more this season than they probably thought we would.
I think that's totally appropriate, and I think that a time like this is a good time to do that. We can think about, guys like Nick Williams, people like that in the past who've kind of done things like that before a Georgia-Florida game. So Rice stepping up to do this probably comes at a good time. It probably does help the young players who, if you're a freshman or a sophomore that hasn't played a lot, you're tired right now, both mentally and physically. And even though it's a big rivalry game, and even though this is a game you probably dreamed about playing in, still reaching down deep, finding the energy needed to play in a game like this probably matters. And as I said before, I think it's really interesting that Georgia's approach to finding the mental edge that's needed seems to center around a team leader saying, all right, guys, let's let the coaches get out of here for a minute. Let's let all of us get in here and talk like men about what needs to be done on Saturday. That's kind of a mature response, it would seem to me anyway, kind of a mature response to the necessary energy to go out and be your best at a rivalry game like Florida. Compare that to the clownish, silly, and frankly embarrassing behavior of Florida last week against Missouri. I've speculated that I thought that was Florida looking for a rallying point. Yeah, if you're watching a video, you see a Dan Mullen dressed like Darth Vader. By the way, you see me wearing my Dan Mullen clown shirt that a listener and viewer once sent to me. So, yeah, I thought Mullen was a clown last week. I thought this was kind of a cheap, totally forced, completely contrived attempt from Florida last week to find the necessary energy, the rallying point, the new focal point for the Gators heading into the Georgia game. By comparison, Monty Rice, as described by N'Kobe Dean there, bringing Georgia players together, seems a whole lot different. And I think, frankly, from the Georgia standpoint, it seems better. It's one of the reasons why Kirby Smart, in my belief, is head and shoulders better than a coach than Dan Mullen, because this is the way that good teams ought to do it. But after having said all of that, it actually leads me to say this, that much the same way that Georgia players, and maybe even some of the Georgia coaches, after what has been a long half season of unprecedented games, SEC opponents week after week after week, after all of that, maybe it is appropriate to kind of find a new level of energy before you play your biggest game of the season. And a team leader like Monty Rice, maybe he does have the ability to be able to do that. But here's what I also believe. I think there's an extent to which fans need to do that too. Now, this year, fans won't play as big a role inside the stadium because it's not going to be a full stadium. So we won't hear raucous crowds rocking back and forth and the split crowd the way we've kind of come to expect it in Jacksonville. It's going to look a little different this year. But in terms of fans and their ability to appreciate what's going to happen on Saturday, maybe the same way Monty Rice says, all right, let's huddle up for a minute and let's remind ourselves what's at stake here. Let's remind ourselves of the personal legacies that we have on the line in a game like this. Maybe those of us who appreciate Georgia football, who start off every season by saying, oh, man, I can't wait to have college football back. I'm so glad college football's back. Then after a few weeks, the newness of that kind of wears off, and now you're frustrated about this, frustrated about that. Maybe it's appropriate for us to also find a new level of focus and, frankly, find a new level of energy and motivation about what's still to come this season, including the biggest game that's going to be played of the entire year coming up on Saturday. With that in mind, I always think about this time of year. And it may be even more poignant this season because he's not playing in this year's game. Richard LeCounte, when DawgNation was able to bring together LeCounte before he signed at Georgia, Jake Fromm before he signed at Georgia, to participate in a Christmas commitments video. And some of you have never seen this before. I'll make sure I put a link to the video when I post the show later on today at DawgNation.com. In that video, surprising Malik Herring and J.J. Holloman to get them to commit, both LeCounte and Fromm dressed up like Santa Claus. It's a really funny video. I love the video. I'm incredibly proud that DawgNation was able to pull that off years ago. But there's a line at the end from Jake Fromm speaking to Richard LeCounte, having dressed up like Santa Claus to kind of trick, so to speak, Herring and Holloman. Fromm asks LeCounte, when do you think we'll let him know it was us who were dressed up like Santa Claus? And what Richard LeCounte said then is fun to think about all these years later. Let me let you hear it.
Hey, Richie, when do you think we need to let Malik and Jeremiah know what we did?
Probably sophomore year, Jacksonville. After we beat Florida again.
So I obviously love that, but the backstory behind that probably matters more than anything else. When LeCounte said that, this is prior to the 2017 season. This is Georgia having lost in 2016, and the awful game in 2015, the embarrassing loss in 2014, and all of those decades of futility for Georgia in Jacksonville were still very much top of mind. It was almost like a pie-in-the-sky dream for a lot of Georgia fans that Georgia would beat Florida 2 years in a row. LeCounte's saying, when we beat them again in our sophomore year. Yet many of you are also aware that it's a lot more than that now. Not only did Georgia beat Florida in LeCounte's freshman year of 2017 and then making good on his prediction to beat them again in his sophomore year of 2018, but they also won the following year. It's now 3 in a row for Georgia over Florida. And even though LeCounte won't play on Saturday, he is a part of a senior class that has a chance to go undefeated in his career against Florida. And for those of us like me in my early 40s who've lived through a lot of decades of frustration, to think a class would come its way through Georgia and never lose to the Gators, that is a beautiful thing to think about. And for Georgia fans who are just kind of fatigued and tired and kind of, the excitement they had about the season kind of wanes a little bit by this point. Get your game face on. It is time to get focused on what is available to Georgia on Saturday. Another win against Florida. A chance to do it for Richie, who's not playing in the game, and a chance for a lot of seniors, or some seniors. Georgia doesn't have quite as many as they would have maybe in the past, but a chance to do something huge for these guys, to collect another win against the Gators. I hope you're ready for the game as I am. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, wherever you find them. As I said before, I'll put the Christmas commitments video for those of you who've never seen it. It's really fun. I'll put that as a link when I post the show later on at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Let me tell you who I know is fired up and ready to go for the cocktail party on Saturday. That is my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. Now, listen, they love having fun on the weekends and watching college football and getting ready for Georgia, Florida. I know they do because I've been there with them for games like that, especially my friend, Bob and his wife Ashley and everybody else. But they are also serious during the week, right? They're your source for Georgia Divorce. That means they put their suits and ties on and dresses and business suits and everything else. The men and women of Merriweather and Tharp get hard to work for you for being an advocate on your side when you're dealing with the divorce process. That's an important thing. They've been through this thousands of times. They can put that work of the past to work for you right now. You've got questions. They've got answers about the divorce process. So reach out and take advantage of that free initial consultation with one of their attorneys. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. That'll get you in touch with my friends at Merriweather and Tharp, who bring DawgNation Daily to you here today. So make sure you check that out. All right, we're going to have Terence Edwards coming up here in a couple of minutes. I said before it'll be Brad Nessler from CBS Sports a little bit later on after that. But for now, though, let's go around the doghouse here today, delivered by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And obviously, Georgia's not without its questions heading into the game on Saturday. And with that in mind, I thought it was interesting that when Georgia coach Kirby Smart made an appearance this week on the Atlanta sports radio station, 680 The Fan, the notion of what Georgia is as a passing team came up. And Georgia, does it have the passing firepower needed to win a game on Saturday against Florida, who we know is probably going to throw it around a pretty good bit? Well, Kirby Smart's message on the radio station 680 The Fan this week was, listen, if you're going to judge us on the basis of what happened last Saturday against Kentucky, from that standpoint, Smart, it sounds like, thinks that would be a mistake. This is what he said about that.
You didn't see much of the passing game Saturday against Kentucky. I think that you would start with the fact that if you're running at 5 and 6 yards a carry, I don't know how much you throw it.
Right.
Especially in a game where they're trying to control the clock and they're trying to shrink the game. So it's hard to do that, and then you'd go back to the Alabama game at times. I thought we really threw the ball well against Alabama in the first half and did some good things.
Sure.
And then we didn't do some good things, and when it broke down or made bad decisions or tipped balls, it really affected us the second half of Alabama. But I think you're looking at a small sample size when you start talking about the passing game if you just look at the Kentucky game.
So listen, from that standpoint right there, Kirby Smart downplaying the notion that that Georgia can't throw the ball simply on the basis of what happened there against Kentucky this past Saturday. A lot of Georgia fans right now, that's not good enough. And I totally understand that. There is a need to prove in these big games that Georgia really can get that done. So in a moment, I'm going to try to separate fact from fiction on this topic, because ultimately what I think may matter less than someone like, say, Terence Edwards, who's actually played in a big-time college offense at Georgia and who's watched this offense closely this season, has a great relationship with some of these wide receivers. I'll ask Terence himself in a moment, just how real is it that Georgia can find that offensive firepower that it needs in a game like this, which is probably going to need some of that on Saturday. So we'll do that coming up. It's Around the Doghouse here right now, delivered by our friends at Marco's Pizza, America's most beloved pizza. It's real, authentic pizza made the Italian way. We love our friends at Marco's Pizza because, frankly, they take really good care of us by contactless, touchless delivery. Pizza cooked in a 450-degree oven, and then nobody touches after that. It just gets delivered nice and safely right there to you. So find them online, the Marco's app, or at marcos.com, and they will deliver some delicious-tasting pizza at a great, great price. All right, later on, Brad Nessler from CBS Sports, another look at UGA recruiting, because Georgia's had some good news on that front a little bit as of late. But for now, for more on the Georgia offense and does it have enough to get it done against the Gators on Saturday, let's talk to our buddy Terence Edwards.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, want to get ready to say hello to former Georgia wide receiver Terence Edwards, who does such a good job with us on the DawgNation postgame show each and every week. Looking forward to welcoming him back to the show again on Saturday. And Terence, I told our audience a moment ago, I wanted to get your opinion on this from the perspective of Kirby Smart, who has kind of downplayed a few times the notion that there's anything to be worried about with the Georgia offense and the passing game in particular. A lot of folks will cite the Kentucky game, and Smart says, listen, that was a game in which we were running the ball effectively, Smart would say, in which we didn't have the ball very much, Smart would say, that, the overall offensive performance, when you factor in all those things, actually wasn't so bad that Georgia kind of asserted its will in the game, I believe, is what Smart's assessment of all that would be. But you played in a high-powered offense at Georgia. You know players who play at Georgia right now. You've worked with them closely. What is your current assessment of what Georgia is doing offensively, passing game in particular?
Well, I didn't get to watch but the first half of the Kentucky game, and I did see that we were running the ball well, and I did see Kentucky did keep the ball way more than they did the week before. So the running game was working, and if that is working, we don't have to put Stetson in that passing game in a predicament we, as fans, don't want them to be. I didn't get an opportunity to watch the second half, but it seems like Zamir Wright and the offensive line was dominant. But with that being said, to win big games like this against Florida, we're going to have to create big, explosive passing plays. And somehow, we're going to have to figure out how we can do that. I personally think we have the playmakers. I just think at some point we have to let loose. At some point, we have to give Stetson an opportunity and those receivers the opportunity to make plays downfield.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting way to say it. Let loose is something a lot of Georgia fans hope happens on Saturday, whether it be, with Bennett or, as you said, finding a way to get, a receiver more involved here. Without going into a full, X's and O's, a dissertation, what would Georgia need to do, or how is it that Georgia can kind of shake off some of the, barriers to progress that seem to have been in place here and really show the best of itself offensively, not for a half, the way that it did for Alabama, but for a full game, which it's probably going to need to do against a team like Florida. How do you think that happens necessarily?
It comes down to players at the end of the day, Brandon. Coaches call plays, and players have to execute. Sometimes the defense wins, sometimes we're going to win. But we just can't put ourselves in bad predicament. We have to stay. The successful thing that we did against Bama in that first half, we stayed above the chains. We was in third and short a whole lot, and now the playbook is exponentially open to the run and pass. So if we get back in third and long, it'll be a long day for us. They have great pass rushers, and Florida, haven't played great defense this season, but once you put a team third and long and those pass rushers can just pin their ears back and go, it'll be a long day for us. So we have to establish and be 50-50 in this game, man. We have to be successful and get positive plays, not negative plays.
Terence, I'm sure you've thought about this a little bit too. The one thing that I remember about last year's game was this was a Georgia offense that had struggled coming into the Florida game a year ago. They'd played in the rain against Kentucky. Jake Fromm had only had 35 yards passing. The game before that was a loss to South Carolina, which Fromm threw 3 picks. And I'm not putting all of that on Fromm. There were a lot of offensive issues the team was dealing with a year ago, but as a for instance for the struggles. And yet against Florida, you have a huge performance from Lawrence Cager, Georgia finding a way to get it done on third down. But the Cager part of this in particular I think is interesting, that he really gave you kind of a hero performance as a receiver a year ago, and maybe somebody on Saturday, whether it's Pickens being healthy enough to play or Kearis Jackson rediscovering the spark that he provided Georgia prior to the Alabama game when he had 2 consecutive 100-plus yard receiving games, or maybe a freshman like Jermaine Burton taking the next step with his development. It almost seems like Georgia needs another receiver to step up and have that big individual game the way that Cager did a lot last year when he was healthy, but in particular in the Florida game. I'm sure you probably agree with that.
Oh, I definitely agree. We definitely need a receiver to open up the field. And what I mean by opening up the field, that Florida just can't stack the box, because we have been running the ball very well, and I'll be the first one to admit, Zamir, Zeus is running the ball crazy. He looked really, really good. I know I was hard on him a couple of games ago, but we can't rely on that running game to score a lot of points. If I was Florida, I would just stack the box, and I'm going to make Stetson beat me right now. So we have to have someone on the outside that can win one-on-one coverage. And we all know Grantham, he's going to play a lot of man, and why wouldn't he right now?
Yeah.
When the best part of our offense is our running game.
Yeah, I think it's exactly right. You said a lot there that I want to kind of unpack here for a moment. Let me remind folks before we do that Terrence will be back with us on Saturday for our DawgNation post-game show after the game. It's presented by the UGA Bookstore. And, of course, as we head towards the holiday season, don't forget, for the Georgia fan in your life, UGA Bookstore is the best place to shop for the apparel that they want this Christmas time of year, and that makes a very easy gift for you to give. All the brands, the Tommy Bahama, the Vineyard Vines, the Nike Coaches gear, the 47 brand, the only place you can get the UGA 10 line from Peter Millari. A lot of you see me wearing that a lot here on the program. That's all available at the UGA Bookstore. In some cases, it's only available at the UGA Bookstore. It probably is the best selection of UGA-type gear. So stop by and see them in Athens. They're open 7 days a week, or shop online anytime, UGABookstore.com. And, of course, we'll see all of you after the game on Saturday for our DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Terrence, you mentioned Zamir White a moment ago. I do think that White's presence matters on Saturday. For as much as we talk about curiosity that we still have about how well Georgia can throw it, because Florida has been vulnerable against the run, because of the fact there's a long history in this game of the team who rushes it better winning the game. I think it's 14 straight years the team that's rushed more has won the game, something along those lines. I do think the running game still matters on Saturday. When you play Alabama and they're so explosive, you need to find a way to be as explosive as they are. But I do think, to a degree, Georgia can still lean on running game and defense in this contest, and I think that they can actually minimize the importance of quarterback a little bit, because I do think that Georgia has an advantage in the other areas. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think the running game is definitely important. As you said, that Florida has been very vulnerable, giving up the run. I think they have some talented secondary players, but there are a lot of freshmen as well. I saw that Florida played like 17 freshmen last week, and I know one of the secondary guys personally, Rashad Torrance, very well, and he's one of the guys that led that secondary tackle. So we're going to have to test him a little bit. He's a freshman, very talented, but we're going to have to test him in the run game and the pass game. So if those safeties start getting older and creep up into the box, we got to have someone to exploit that over the top and make them think what we're going to do. We have to mix it up, B. We have to be able to run, pass, and it just can't be lean to one side heavy on run or pass.
Why do you think Georgia's had so much success against Todd Grantham on third downs? I mentioned this a year ago, or I should say earlier in the show from last year's game, when Georgia really found some big-time passing plays on some of those third down opportunities. What do you think it is about Grantham that makes him so easy to exploit in that situation?
In the coaching world, people always say you are who you are. So I think he has a long history of showing what he likes to do. He likes to blitz. He's going to play at 3-4 and get those guys rushing. So I think a lot of times we have dialed up the right play because we kind of estimated what he's going to do on third down. But just to be successful on anybody on third down, we can stay in third down and medium, and we have a great chance to continue to move the sticks. And if we do that, I think our people will be satisfied with our offense. It doesn't matter if we throw for 300 or rush for 300. if we consistent moving the chains and scoring points, I think the fans would be very happy with the performance.
Let me finish up with this. I mentioned this before you joined the show today, the role that motivation plays in a game like this. And I'm a believer that you get to the midway point of a season, especially a grind like this year has been, players do get fatigued. And the challenge of refocusing is probably a little harder than sometimes we give it credit for. It sounds like Georgia's had some leaders step up this week and try to, prod some of those younger players along. As a player yourself, where did you find yourself around this time of year, and how did you make sure that you finished a season as strongly as you started it?
Well, this game right here, I don't think you need any motivation from anyone. No matter if you're tired, you're fresh. This game brings the motivation of it's the Georgia-Florida game. So if you're not ready to play this game, then you don't love football, in my opinion. So that's the extra motivation. But just the mid-season grind right now is, in the normal circumstances, you'd be, dealing with school, dealing with study hall, dealing with a lot of components that a lot of people don't understand what athletes go through. So it is a grind, especially for these freshmen. I mean, we play a lot of freshmen just trying to figure out life as a college student is an uphill battle itself. Now putting an extra, got to play an all SEC schedule. It's just right now the mental part is a little toxic, but I think the leaders get these guys refocused, the coaches get these guys refocused, and let them know that our goals are still intact, and that's why we're playing right now, to finish out these goals.
Terrence, that's beautifully said. I appreciate you being with us here today. I'm looking forward to seeing you back again on Saturday for our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Looking forward to that. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp today.
Thanks, B.A. Thanks for having me. Look forward to Saturday.
Me too.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Great stuff there from Terence Edwards. Can't wait to see him on Saturday again, and certainly love having him here on the program today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Let me also remind you that we got more coming on the DawgNation video channels today, including later on, it's our DawgNation Happy Hour, poured by our friends at Classic City Lager. It's a different kind of cocktail party this year, but a lot of you still want that cocktail close by as you're watching the game here this week. Let me suggest your beverage of choice maybe should be an Athens original, a true taste of the Classic City from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company. Classic City Lager style beer, so it's a little lighter beer, but it still tastes great. No sacrifice on the flavor there. Crisp, enjoyable flavor, great, easy drinking beer. Goes great with some football this weekend. And I'll see you later on today, 4 p.m. Another great former dog, John Stinchcomb, will be with us for that. DawgNation Happy Hour, poured by the Classic City Lager. That is coming up. Speaking of motivation for Georgia, by the way, we're only a couple of minutes away from welcoming Brad Nessler to the program here today, so we'll do that, just a few minutes' time here on the program. Looking forward to doing that. Speaking of motivation for Georgia, Florida, I think one of the things that is pretty interesting right now is the fact that there's this talk of Kyle Trask Heisman Trophy. You've seen former Florida coach Steve Spurrier be a part of some of this kind of stuff. Trask himself has been asked about that this week. Dan Mullins talked about this some too. I think this is interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, I think there's nothing that Georgia would love more, the Georgia defense would love more, than to be able to prevent this from ever being mentioned again. And if Georgia can stifle Trask on Saturday, that obviously goes a long way towards doing that. But the other part of that is this. Dan Mullen has existed as quarterback whisperer extraordinaire for a long time. But let me ask you this. How much actual evidence is there that Dan Mullen is a great quarterbacks coach? Obviously, some of the stuff that he was a part of with Dak Prescott speaks for itself. Prescott was, I won't deny this, a very good college quarterback at Mississippi State. But then in the aftermath of kind of trying to find the next Dak Prescott for Dan Mullen, that has happened a lot less than you probably think it does, because we've been told about what a genius is when it comes to quarterbacks. It did not happen for Nick Fitzgerald at Mississippi State. Remember the storyline going into the 2017 game? Fitzgerald, who was not really recruited by Georgia, wanted to play in that game and show that after having been tutored by Dan Mullen, that he was the quarterback that Georgia should have had. Georgia beat the 37-3. I'm not even sure if Fitzgerald even finished the year as Bulldogs quarterback that year. So the next great quarterback for Dan Mullen after Dak Prescott was not Nick Fitzgerald. And then it was supposed to be Felipe Franks at Florida, and Franks has frankly played better with Kendall Briles at Arkansas than he ever played at Florida. So is the real, tutor of quarterbacks, is it really Mullen, or is it maybe it's a chance it's a guy like Briles who's gotten more out of Franks than Dan Mullen was ever able to? Admittedly, Trask became a solid starter for Florida a year ago and has a chance to build on that in a game like Saturday. The numbers thus far this year have been really good. But if he falters against Georgia, I obviously believe that he will. If he falters against Georgia, then once again, it's like Dan Mullen as this developer of quarterbacks. The narrative certainly exists, but the evidence to support that narrative might be more lacking than you might realize. That's something to watch as we head towards Saturday. A couple of other games that I just continue to have on my mind. This Tennessee-Arkansas game, I think, is going to be a ton of fun. I obviously love what Sam Pittman has done at Arkansas. That's been a great story. But for Tennessee, it's a chance now to not have your season end prematurely. Tennessee has gotten a lot of heat in the aftermath of getting blown out by Alabama, after having gotten blown out by Georgia, the Jimmy Brumbaugh firing that some have said happened during a game for Tennessee while also getting blown out against Kentucky. It's been a really bad stretch as of late. And, I've said before that there's no doubt that to me Jeremy Pruitt is a recruiter. Jeremy Pruitt is a guy that knows, especially defensive football. But demeanor matters for a head coach, and how he responds on Saturday after his team has really kind of gotten beaten up for a few weeks and then had a chance to take a Saturday off, how he responds, I think is going to be very curious to watch. He ought to have a program advantage over Sam Pittman, who is trying to resurrect an Arkansas program that essentially barely existed at an SEC level prior to his hiring. Vegas expects this to be a close game, but this would be a bad loss for Tennessee and just an amazing stretch of games for the Razorbacks thus far this year. Speaking of Vegas, Arkansas undefeated against the spread this season, so keep that in mind. Then one more game I want to mention here. I've been high on Texas A&M. I have been a believer that they were actually going to kind of finally give Jimbo Fisher something that felt like success. So far, that has happened. But they've still got a stretch of games to go, all of which they'll be favored in. They've got a stretch of games to go where they need to, to continue to play at a high level. I would say that on Saturday against South Carolina, maybe it's just a little bit dangerous. Obviously, Will Muschamp fighting to save his job there. South Carolina has not gotten much attention this year because when you think about teams being better than we thought, a lot of that's gone towards Arkansas. Some of that's gone towards Missouri. But the truth is, the South Carolina win against Auburn doesn't look so bad right now. South Carolina kept it closer than the experts would have thought against Florida. This is not a Gamecocks team that has, laid down and died really for anyone as of yet, with the exception maybe of LSU, which I thought was kind of a tougher spot on the road than maybe it was kind of given credit for. This game, to me, is semi-worth watching. These two programs know each other really well. For A&M, it's a chance to validate itself once again. For Muschamp, it's a chance just to kind of solidify his employment status. That's not such a bad game on Saturday. I'd pay pretty close attention. That will make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, I want to now bring your Kroger Fresh Take to you. Each and every week we talk about Kroger being fresh for everyone, but they also provide the Fresh Take for you here on DawgNation Daily as well. And I think the Fresh Take today focuses on the current state of Georgia recruiting. That for a lot of Georgia fans who kind of wonder what is the current status of this program all the way around, how close is it to being ready to be a big-time performer at the national level, a true national championship contender? I think it's important to remember just how well Georgia continues to do in recruiting. As a for instance on Sunday, even after having gotten a four-star commit on Friday from Terry Ingham Dawkins, on Sunday, Georgia goes out and gets a five-star from the class of 2022, and it really gets very little attention all the way around. Things are going well for Georgia when a five-star commit, even for 2 cycles ahead, is not necessarily the dominant headline around Georgia, but that's exactly what Georgia did when Dayon Bowie committed on Sunday. Bowie was also on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger last night, and I wanted to give you a little brief taste of that. Here is Bowie.
It's just really family, really. Nick Williams, I talk to him like every day, like hours of the day. He's just building that family, and we got a bond, and I don't want to break, so we're going to keep it going.
How did they react to it?
Well, I told Coach Nick and Coach Warren, the DB coach, and their reaction was excited. Had me excited. I didn't know how they were going to react to it, so it's a good reaction.
So that's Bowie explaining what caused him to choose Georgia and how he felt in the aftermath of making that decision. If you'll watch last night's edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, you'll get the full taste of that. And to kind of wrap up our Kroger Fresh Take here, it's just kind of nice to know that even in the midst of a busy season, the Georgia recruiting machine continues to roll along and do really well. Bowie, another example of that. By the way, speaking of Kroger, yesterday I told you about our world's largest virtual cocktail party that we're going to do Friday night at 6 p.m. And I invited many of you to sign up for it. And we had a flood of people sign up for that. I think our spots may be gone now. They're either gone or close to gone. You can go to DawgNation.com and find out more about that to see if there's anything left. The good news is if you didn't get a chance to sign up to be a part of the broadcast itself or get yourself one of these really cool Kroger DawgNation masks that kind of celebrate the last 3 years of wins for Georgia against Florida, you can still be a part of the broadcast on both Facebook and YouTube. The sign-up was for people who wanted to ask a question, get their cocktail shown live on the air, so we kind of celebrate a virtual cocktail party. So that's all really fun. Go to DawgNation.com and find out more about that. Sign up if there's any space left, and if not, go and be a part of the broadcast Friday night at 6 p.m. And by the way, I'm going to see if I can give a few more masks away to the people who watch the broadcast. That's going to be fun. I'll see you for the world's largest virtual cocktail party this Friday, 6 p.m., courtesy of our friends at Kroger. With that in mind, we'll get ready to say hello to Brad Nessler from CBS Sports. He's calling the game on Saturday, and what a game it expects to be, and what a call that Brad Nessler will have on that. Brad, thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp today. I certainly appreciate your time.
Always good to talk to you, Brandon. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I'm curious of where you are heading into this game on Saturday, particularly when it comes to Florida. You know, Georgia fans have seen some good from Florida. They've obviously scored a lot of points. There's been some bad. They've given up a lot of points as well, and there was the weirdness of the game against Missouri on Saturday for a number of reasons. As you've prepped for Florida, and I can't remember if you've seen them on CBS yet this year. I apologize for not remembering that. But, you know, what is your impression of the Gators at the moment?
Well, I think the biggest impression I have right now is their head coach has had some weird moments in the last couple of weeks, you know. That's the first thing that jumps out at everybody, I think, is that I don't know if Dan Mullen's trying to become Steve Spurrier or whatever his thing is, but he's always been a little bit that way. And, you know, I was thinking about it last night. I don't know if it's that when you're in the same conference as Nick Saban, who's won 6 national titles, Kirby Smart, who has been close, Jimbo Fisher, who has won and has a huge contract, and, you know, then you got Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach that are a different personality. You know, I think I sometimes wonder if Dan is worried about getting buried on page 6 in this conference, you know, and so some of the things he's done lately, he's a heck of a coach. I think he's done one of the best jobs with Kyle Trask. You know, everybody talks about he's a quarterback guru and all that stuff. Well, when you have Tim Tebow and you have Dak Prescott, that makes your credentials look a little bit better. But what he's done with Kyle Trask has been really remarkable. And, you know what I think of Florida? It's the same thing you said. They can score a lot of points. I'm not sure if they can stop anybody. So that's the great setup for Saturday, is if Georgia can score any points on anybody, and whether or not Florida, if Georgia can hold Florida in check as far as scoring a lot of points.
We talked to you a few weeks ago, right around the time that the Stetson Bennett story was beginning for Georgia. At the time, Bennett had played really well. A lot of Georgia fans think he's not quite playing quite so well anymore. What do you make of the status of Bennett as the Georgia quarterback? And are you seeing enough from the Georgia offense to think that it can keep pace on Saturday with a Florida team that's obviously looking to try to score a lot of points?
Yeah, I don't know if they can or not. You know, up until halftime of the Alabama game, you know, I thought Stetson played really well. You know, one of the interceptions in that game should have been a catch and probably could have maybe changed the complexion of that game and kept it either close or Georgia being able to win. You know, the other one, he's had some bad luck with passing lanes. You know, being the size he is, there are guys that, like the Russell Wilsons and the Drew Breeses, that know how to overcome that, and that's why they're as good as they are. You know, he's thrown too many into the hands of big fellas up front. And some of that's the offensive linemen. You got to get those guys, you know, blocked down so that doesn't happen, but it probably wouldn't happen if he was 6'3". So, you know, he's made some choices that haven't been great. I think he's had some deals where the receivers could have certainly helped him out. And, you know, I thought the same thing last year when you and I talked several times about Jake Fromm, is like, you know, tell the receivers, hey, get open, and when you get open, catch the ball. That would be really nice. And if they did that more frequently, I think his stats would be better. Now, that being said, you know, if Georgia rushes for 250 yards on Saturday, they win the game. And that might be what they have to do, because I don't see any kind of air raid offense coming from Georgia all of a sudden in 1 week. It's just not going to happen.
So when we talked earlier this season, you said you didn't have a lot of backup quarterback notes on your flip card, that you were expecting the game to fully belong to Stetson Bennett. Has your opinion altered at all? Do you still expect Bennett to be the only quarterback to play for Georgia on Saturday?
I do, and I might be totally wrong. I think if there was going to be any decision made to try somebody else, it would have happened after the bye week when they had more time to get, reps with DeJuan and JT, and whether that happened or not, I'm sure it did. But if that didn't change the opinion of Kirby, that's not going to change the opinion of anything else. And unless something disastrous happens, if he throws 3 interceptions in the first quarter, they've got to do something because you're going to lose, so you might as well try something different. But if it just keeps pace and the game's close, I don't see him getting moved out of there.
Let me finish with this, Brad. In addition to being a guy that's followed Georgia my entire life, I also love the Georgia-Florida game. I love the pageantry. I love the cocktail party. It's going to be different this year, and for CBS, who's broadcast this game for what seems like a million years, and obviously you've been a part of a lot of these for the last few years, how different is it going to be for you? And I guess how different is what CBS – now, we've obviously seen a bunch of CBS games this year, but in terms of the backdrop of what is typically a little bit more than just a football game, how weird is it going to be knowing it's not full stands, it's not tailgating, it's not all that kind of stuff? Have you taken much time to consider the fact this is just a very different version of Georgia-Florida this year?
Yeah, no doubt I have, and I agree with you. That's the big part of it is, we did a tease a couple years ago, I guess it was, that I wrote, and we had a camera actually on the bus of one of the teams coming in, and you could see the players, with their sport coats on and their headphones on and just looking out the window, and they're coming across the bridge on the St. Johns River, and then you see the stadium, and then all of a sudden there's that backdrop of this gigantic party going on, and it gives you chills, and we're not going to have that, and when I get to the stadium, the fans are right next to where our trucks are, and so, they either want to take pictures or they want to swear at you, one of the two. It depends on, how they feel about your broadcasting capabilities. So I'm going to miss that a little bit because it's almost like we get to tailgate with them when we get there, and it's going to be not an empty parking lot, but it's not going to be the same. The cool thing is, for the first time this year, having 17 or 18,000 people, at least the ticket distribution is going to be pretty much equal. So the noise should be, going like it normally would. It just wouldn't be quite as loud. But yeah, I'm gonna miss all the parties and all that kind of stuff. It's not gonna be the same.
Well, either way, it'll be a great product Saturday on CBS. You, Gary Danielson, Jamie Erdahl, can't wait for the call. Brad, we certainly appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp today. Hope you have a good time in Jacksonville. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
You got it, Brandon. Have a good weekend, buddy.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, listen, I think that's incredibly well said. That there's a lot about this year's game that just feels different. It's one of the reasons why we're teaming with Kroger to do the virtual cocktail party on Friday night. We want some taste of normalcy in what is a weird year. But I'll give CBS credit. You watch those games on TV, they've done a good job. And, maybe not every network has had it go quite as well for them this year. CBS has found a way to provide a great product. Georgia's and the SEC's been lucky to have that CBS television product. And I'm sure it'll be good and pretty on TV, even if the overall mood around the cocktail party is just a little bit different. So I'm excited about the game. The stakes are incredibly high for Georgia. The energy around the game, I just think is it's unparalleled, unmatched, even in a year like this. And in fact, let me remind you, Gator Hater Updater now at 1,468 days. Y'all, that number matters. Hope to see it keep climbing. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. A little bit of Darth Mullen there, wrapping things up. What a goofball he is, and that's why I'm wearing my Mullen clown shirt on today's show here a little bit. R.S. Andrews Cool Down Time. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews for all of that. Heating systems, making sure yours is ready to go for the winter to come. R.S. Andrews can certainly go a long way towards getting that done for you. You got to find them online at rsandrews.com. We're going to rock and roll and get a few comments here. I started on YouTube yesterday. I'll start on Facebook here today. So we'll knock out a few and then we'll get going here. Let's see what else. And on video, Chad Williams says. No doubt about that. John Rhodes, keeping the quarterback conversation alive. Trey Dukes gives us an and on video. Thanks for that. Barry Watkins says, where's the link for the cocktail party on Facebook? So, Barry, here's how it's going to work. So, the people who get signed up to be in the broadcast can get a link to that at DawgNation.com. Now, it may be sold out. I know it was. I think we sold out almost during the show yesterday, so we could be at our limit. This is not an artificial cutoff. We're mailing a mask to everyone who signs up, so there's only so many of those that we can do, and plus I don't think you can have just like a gazillion people on video teleconference anyway before it just kind of gets out of hand. So we had to kind of cap it. But beyond that, it'll come, and I'll promise I'll spend a lot of time explaining this tomorrow. It's going to come on video as a normal Dog Nation show. So some people can be a part of the show, but for others, it's going to come on video like a normal Dog Nation show. So if you can't get the link to be in the show, then you can watch it on Facebook and YouTube, and it'll pop up on your feed the same way that it does now. But if you don't get the notification, because gosh knows, sometimes Facebook is weird about how it sends those things out, then just know it's going to start Friday at 6 p.m. Let's see what else. Get a couple more here on Facebook. I'll go see some YouTube. I'm just trying to see what people are talking about. Somebody asked me where I got my shirt. The shirt was actually a gift. It was given to me from someone who was one of our Dog Nation Days of Summer events 2 summers ago. Jacob O'Neill says, I've been late all week, then I cut the show short. I don't know we've cut the show short too much, have we? I think, we were late yesterday. We weren't too bad late today. But I don't think we've done anything shorter than normal. The shows themselves have actually been pretty long. Brock Evans said, did Mike Griffith have any more context in his prediction? It's good to see Brock in the comment section, by the way. Any more context in the prediction about JT Daniels? No, I'm going to leave that one for Mike to explain on his own. As I've said before, that's not what I expect to happen. It was interesting to hear Brad Nessler in no certain terms say that's not what he expects to happen. So I'll look forward to hearing more from Mike on that. Daniel Aldridge, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Christopher, I hope I pronounced this right. Novotny? Did I say that right? Says, what about Jordan Davis? I guess maybe I've been more pessimistic than I should be about Davis. My assumption is he's not playing because if it's an elbow, I feel like you got to have that elbow to get the push, the extension that you need. I guess I've been under the assumption that he would not play, but maybe I've been too pessimistic about that. Yeah, John Anthony, 7-6 Apparel is the company that makes this, and they are not an advertiser. I'm just wearing this because someone gave it to me, and I do enjoy it. Marshall Fleming says he thinks that they'll use DeJuan Mathis in a few packages. I know a lot of Georgia fans would like to see it. Let me go to YouTube here for a moment. Hope all of you are getting ready for some fun this weekend. Green Soldier says Florida's wide receivers and H-back worry me. Yeah, listen, they've got some offensive weapons, and after Georgia had trouble with Jalen Waddle, the speed and the quickness of Kadarius Toney would seem to be a little bit of an issue there. Georgia. One thing that Georgia's secondary does is it runs really well. So there's not a lot of guys who are going to run past the Georgia secondary. Some of what we saw with Waddle getting as open as he got and Devontae Smith getting as open as he got was really more about how they were schemed open, I think, by Steve Sarkisian, who called what appeared to be close to a perfect game against Georgia. But I certainly understand where you're coming from. There are some legit Florida offensive weapons now. Frank Patterson says, any word on K-Mac and the other injuries? We have at least a half dozen. So the McIntosh and Pickens thing is one of those things of, do you believe what's being said or not? We saw in the case of James Cook in the Tennessee game that it certainly seemed like Georgia chose to hold him out as a way of making sure he was fully ready to go for Alabama, and it seems like it kind of worked out that way. How much of what happened with Pickens and McIntosh was the same? We know that Pickens and McIntosh both practiced prior to Kentucky, and I believe, and certainly in Pickens' case, have been practicing since then. It's just a matter of, was the holdout last week for precautionary reasons because Georgia thought it could beat Kentucky without them? I think that's a pretty fair question to ask. My guess is that I certainly think they'll be traveling to Jacksonville on Saturday. How involved they're going to be, I guess, remains to be seen. And as far as the Davis thing goes, as I said before, some people are optimistic that he still may play. Kirby has certainly tried to promote that idea. I'm pretty skeptical of that. We know that Julian Rochester isn't. Sounds like Lewisine probably will, when that certainly matters. That's a big deal. To think that you might be down both your safeties in a game like that would be pretty tricky. Thomas Van Santa says he likes the idea of Kendall Milton having a field day against Florida. Boy, I'd love to see that. Jarvis Hanna says, where can I get an and on video shirt? Yeah, we should make some of those at some point in time. That's not a bad idea. Brian McPhail says, I'd love to see Karras Jackson get another 100 receiving yard day. Yeah, I mean, you can't downplay the role that Lawrence Cager played in last year's game. Now, Cager and Jackson are different kind of receivers, but my point here is that big-time receiving play was, from an individual guy, was a big part of the win a year ago. Georgia did not do a lot offensively against Florida last year. It only seems that way because Cager came up big on a few third downs. There was also the Eli Wolf third down catch at the end of the game, too. You got the big hero performance from Cager last year. It'd be nice to think you could get a hero performance from a receiver on Saturday. Nathan Morris says, has a time frame been put on LeCounte? I guess the thing I heard, I think Mike told me this, that it's a few weeks, at least. So this is not a 1 or 2 week type deal. It's a few weeks, and then it just becomes a question of, does he play again? I'm not going to speculate that one way or another. I mean, a play again this year is what I mean. I'm not speculating on that one way or another, but this is not like a 2 week type thing for him, I don't think. My understanding is the ribs are broken. That's that's the kind of thing. It's just hard to have the movement you need and have the collision, the comfort with collision that's required to play football when you're banged up in the rib area. Nature Gator says the key of the game will be the play of the Florida defense and also the right tackle for the Gators. I would say that's probably true. Florida's more experienced with its offensive line this year than it was when they played Georgia a year ago. You'd have to watch Florida closely to know if that experience has meant better for the Florida offensive line. I think for Georgia, that's one of the areas they think they can exploit, probably need to be able to exploit. Georgia's been better at getting to the quarterback this year than you might realize. Connor Riley mentioned that when he joined us a little earlier this week on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. So, from that standpoint, it is true. It is true. Florida would love to have you believe that what happened last Saturday against Missouri was proof of a better Florida defense, especially given the fact that Missouri had scored some points against teams prior to that. I think it comes down to, as I said before, these are seemingly not just bitter rivals, but opposite programs right now. Georgia is good defensively and questions on offense. Florida is good offensively with questions on defense, and we'll see which side gets the advantage over the other. Tristan West says we have to get the tight ends more involved. Washington made a great catch last week. They were effective in last year's game. I'm not saying that Smart would intentionally orchestrate it this way, but certainly on this show, we would hype this up if it would happen. I mean, imagine if Georgia could exploit tight ends on Saturday in its offense, especially if it was Darnell Washington, given the attention, justifiably so, to Kyle Pitts, who legitimately is a very good player. It would certainly make for a fun storyline if it's Georgia throwing to a tight end that helps cause that victory on Saturday. I would certainly like that. Jacob Thompson calling for 2 Adam Anderson sacks. I'd love to see that. I know Adam's been a little down about his playing time. I'd love to see that. It'd be great. CB brings a good point. Says, I just want to say that I'm very grateful that we even got to the Georgia-Florida game. This season almost didn't happen, and now we're 48 hours away from the cocktail party. Go Dogs. CB, that is exactly right. Very, very true. Bob Zamblin, it's good to see him in the comment section as well. Says it's going to be interesting to see how the Dogs stop Kyle Pitts. It is. Smart has said, listen, this is not just a double team situation because you're obviously taking personnel away from the other aspects. I would say that, and I'm not an X's and O's expert, so you can disregard this if you want. I would say it becomes easier to shade extra defenders in the direction of Kyle Pitts when you don't have the fear of the Florida running game. For instance, I would say that the one thing that could really open up Florida's ability to run or opportunity to run, especially with Jordan Davis either not 100% or maybe worst case scenario not playing, if Georgia's too preoccupied with Pitts and what he's doing, all of a sudden the middle of the field gets a little softer. All of a sudden defender eyeballs are pointed somewhere else. And all of a sudden, that's where, Florida, who, Kirby Smart has said, historically Dan Mullen's going to have that downhill runner, that guy who hits a hole quick and gets the yards that he can get. If you're thinking a lot about Kyle Pitts, it seems like it would open up more opportunities for the run game. And conversely, if Florida just simply either is not committed to trying to get a running game going or ineffective in trying to do so, then I would suggest that the ability to stop Kyle Pitts becomes easier because of that. All of a sudden, your linebackers are just freed up to do a little bit more. I mean, think about, Nakobe Dean had a big performance last week, double-digit tackles for him against Kentucky. It is not easy to stop a guy like Pitts when you're thinking about very athletic but also somewhat beefy defensive backs, incredibly speedy linebackers like Dean. When you think about those weapons at your disposal, if Georgia with what it has can't stop him, then maybe just nobody can. But certainly no one's going to say Georgia is lacking in the personnel to give this a very good shot. Christian Joseph Polniak also talking about using tight ends. Yeah, listen, it'd be a big deal. Arthur Lynch comes up there. Fun to think about. Chad Williams brings up the over-under on Brenton Cox penalties. It is interesting that Brenton Cox, and I guess Connor wrote about Brenton yesterday, he's just not really been that big of a storyline going into this year's game. I think the feeling about Cox and, say, Cade Mays is completely different. I think there was some irritation with Mays because he left when he was a starter and, took some drama with him and some things like that. And so there was some frustration with Cade Mays that does not really exist for Brenton Cox. For the most part, I don't want to say that Georgia recruited over Brenton Cox because that may be overstating things slightly, but Georgia recruited so well for the class of 2019 with those outside linebacker pass rusher types that it was going to be harder for Brenton Cox to find a spot on the field. It definitely was, especially given the fact that when he was here, I do think it's fair to say that I'm not quite so sure his commitment to work ethic was necessarily exactly what it needed to be. If you go back and I'll tell you a quick backstory. I think Connor's probably told this before. But if you go scroll the front page of DawgNation.com, like scroll the stories, the Brenton Cox story, it's Cox like doing a pose like this, and that's the photograph for the story. Connor will tell you that he took that photo and he took it at a Georgia practice inside Sanford Stadium one summer. I guess it was last spring or last summer before Cox transferred, and Cox saw him taking a photo of him and like posed for the picture. Can you imagine a Georgia player in the middle of practice stopping to pose for a photograph? If you want any kind of evidence that he's more suited for Florida than he is for Georgia, the fact that he's posing for photos during a practice when he's in line to run a drill or to get a practice rep, that's just not the way that Georgia. I've seen some Georgia practices over the years under Kirby Smart. There's just not posing for photos going on during these practices. They are very, very intense and very quickly paced. So if you ever wanted to know that a guy like Brenton was not long for Georgia, the fact that he's giving you the pose, during practice is all you need to know on that. And I don't really have a bad word to say about him, whatever, but that is true. Matt Roof again brings a pretty good point. Do the math in your head here for a moment. If Mullen is Darth Vader, which based on his Halloween costume, he'd like for you to believe that he is, then that means that Kirby Smart is Dan Mullen's daddy, which would make Kirby Smart the emperor. Now, that's not, I guess, technically, familially true, but he is his superior. So that means that Kirby Smart is the Emperor Palpatine of the SEC. So, yeah, keep that in mind on Saturday. That's not so bad. I don't mind that. All right, let me do one or two more. We're going to leave. Gerald Harmon says Darnell Washington playing Kyle Pitts in practice. I bet that'll help Georgia prepare. Maybe so. Could be. Let me listen. Practice against Darnell Washington. Practicing against Darnell Washington is certainly a luxury that Georgia players have to get better. Let me do a couple more on YouTube. Frank Patterson says, give me a rushing yards prediction. Well, that's a good one. Can Georgia get 2 on Saturday? Maybe more than that? I don't think Florida gets 100 yards rushing. I don't. Scott Harris says Bennett or Lambert. I'm telling you right now, Stetson Bennett's way better than that. Bennett's got his problems, but he's way, way better than that. Scott, I'm just telling you right now, he's way better than that. All right, we're going to go. Thanks all of you for being here. Appreciate that. Darian Ford says he thinks that Nick Saban's Palpatine. You better hope that Kirby Smart's Luke Skywalker. Yeah, I would say that's probably pretty good Star Wars mythology understanding as well. Kathy Aguavia Green says, well, if you're going to have Darnell Washington playing Kyle Pitts, who plays Kadarius Toney? That's a good question. If Georgia had someone who could emulate Kadarius Toney in practice, they should probably put that guy in the game too, I would say, because Georgia probably doesn't have enough of that speed on the offensive side right now. Randy Hall, thanks for the kind words on that. Ryan Bauer says, I'd love to see some 2 tight end sets. I think that you will. I also think that the brilliance of Todd Monken could potentially be on display by throwing more out of those 2 tight end sets, but it could be one of those days on Saturday. William and Elaine Morgan says Gators get 500 yards passing. Please don't let that be true. Please don't let that be true. All right. Anything else before we go? I don't think so. John Anthony says, beat those lousy, stinking Gators. I love that. Daniel Aldridge, thanks for the kind words. Epic Robinson reminding us that, once again, we have said we're getting off the air before actually doing it. And, yes, that's true. I do like doing that each and every day. At least it seems that way. Also, as you get ready to go, don't forget more election coverage online, Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. The presidential results in Georgia still remain too close to call, but that should resolve itself today. AJC will have plenty on that. We know one of the senatorial races is heading for a runoff. The other one, I guess, is also the potential of heading that way as well. So lots of election results to give you. Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. You can go there for all of that. We'll keep it to college football here on our program, and we certainly appreciate R.S. Andrews for allowing the R.S. Andrews cool down to take place to give us a chance to have a conversation like this. Thanks for being here. You can find them online at rsandrews.com for air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They will take good care of you on all of that. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. I'll look forward to seeing you then, everybody.